G'day and welcome back to another Dbz Dokkan battle video. In this video we're going to be taking a look at the Extreme Super Battle Road stage for the final Trump card category. So obviously this is the kind of extreme Super Battle Road stage, so it's a little bit tougher than the Super Battle Road stage. And we're going to be taking a look at the final Trump card team, and you can go a couple ways with this. You can kind of go with like a super base team, you can go for a non-super base team, and you can go for like a full-on team. You can go for like an extreme base team or something like that. But honestly speaking, I do find it best to kind of look at just doing kind of like very simple stuff. I don't think it's absolutely necessary to kind of go with an extreme team or anything, or like a hybrid team or stuff like that. I like to keep things quite like secure and quite base. So I like to kind of just look at doing like simple team builds. So all extreme, keep it simple, all under the Terrifying Conquerors / Movie Bosses tab. And I've gone with AGL Turles as my lead, the easy aid one, just because I think he's in a good position. Also, I didn't want to just use the LR Strength Cooler kind of team again, so I wanted to do it with a little bit of a twist. And so I went with the AGL Turles, because AGL Turles is a really solid unit. He's really quite solid, and I think overall there is a good space for a team like this. Unfortunately, a lot of this team does gain a lot of buffs facing super units, but unfortunately they never make hard events where units face future units, super class units. So it's always a bit of a catch-22 in that sense. But Turles looks pretty good. He looks in a solid position, brings stunning, brings defense, brings a lot to the table, which is great. We also have the free-to-play Frieza and Sorbet. A decent unit. Big thing we brought them for is their stunning capability, which is basically why we've brought them. Then we've got their friend LR Cooler, we've got our Strength Cooler, and we've got a Tech Cooler. And the reason we're rocking with Tech Cooler is because Tech Cooler actually is basically like a mini version of a Strength Cooler to a certain extent. But the big thing with Tech Final Form Cooler is that he's got quite a lot of stunning capability. So, with that in mind, obviously it's ideal to bring him into SBR, ESBR setting, because we need the ability to stun units. It does make things a little bit easier overall. So beyond that, there's not too much else to consider. We've got there the Sealess, who's just going to kind of float around, and we've got Physical Cooler, who's also just going to float around. So both of those are just damage dealers first and foremost. They're not there for anything else other than doing some pretty gnarly damage. So that's kind of the main focus, in terms of that. So beyond that, I think it's pretty straightforward. Personally speaking, I think for the most part it's fairly simple. And I think in general we shouldn't really have a huge problem. Personally speaking, I think there is a decent level of kind of functionality within this team that we cover with all of the stuns. With all of the stunning, SBR and ESBR allow for things like stunning, allow for things like sealing. So with a lot of this control, we kind of enable ourselves to have a pretty good time, because it lets us obviously how can I say, keep our enemies in check. which, you know, is always something you want to do. Big thing though, of course, as well, is that, you know, when it comes down to these type of events and things like that, these events are more, I want to say, glass cannon than anything else. You can hit hard, but also get hit hard, if that makes sense. So it is, you know, by design, a little bit of a kind of tougher situation overall. You know, it's not necessarily super easy to just kind of like tank all of the attacks, especially with a team like ours that does have some build-up time. We don't have, you know, a pseudo first slot tank in this team, so yeah. But in general, I think the team does pretty well. Yeah, as I mentioned before, the stunning is really what keeps us in a comfortable position, even though we don't have some of the tankiest units in the game here. The Frieza and Sorbet can tank, but only below 50% health. So it's not, you know, it's not a like, oh, they can just tank kind of situation. We need to, unfortunately, yeah, obviously have them be below a certain health requirement for them to tank sufficiently well, which I don't want to say is a huge hindrance, but is obviously something you need to be aware of as the person running the team. You can't just, you know, stick them in harm's way and then expect them to tank. It's unfortunately not so simple. But yeah, I think in general I have a pretty good time running this team. I don't think we ran into too many headaches or problems overall. The first fight's probably the hardest one for us, strictly speaking, because the first fight essentially has multiple enemies, whereas the second two fights have 2 enemies. And when you only have 2 enemies, or when you're fighting a low number of enemies, stunning becomes a lot more powerful, just due to the fact that essentially you are in a position of being able to keep the entire team controlled to a certain extent, if that makes sense. So yeah, it is obviously very, very, very evident from that perspective. But yeah, I wouldn't say there's anything else really that we need to be too concerned about. I think overall I was really quite happy with the team functionality. I think it was very, very solid, and I think we had a very, very solid kind of session, I think, personally speaking. Yeah, I think it was overall a very, very solid kind of session, and I think the team did a very, very, very good job with kind of presenting and handling everything, and I don't think we ended up having too many major issues. Obviously, from the second fight onwards, the main strategy is always to stun and control the opposition. So with that being kind of performed, there's not really anything that kind of leaves us wanting or in a bad position. And with the strength a la Frenicula, mopping up the fight is pretty straightforward. So yeah, that is it for Final Trump Card. Obviously, I'd love to hear your guys' team builds or any suggestions for mine if you have. But yeah, that's basically it. So obviously, once again, I'd love to thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video. But until then, stay safe, take care, and bye.